is gardeners my commanding wife? So it has nothing to do with the conversation we're about to have. But, well, since you mentioned it, let's get to it now. So I asked earlier what you thought about the fact that if you're married and you acquired any property during the marriage, well, your spouse owns it equally, even if they contributed a peswa or nothing at all. They contributed. Yeah. So we look at property acquisition in marriage. What does the law say about it? Huh. Very interesting conversation coming up this afternoon. We're so glad my good friend, my brother, lawyer Dennis Adjei Dwomoh, who's a managing partner at Law Plus Ghana, was kind enough to come over to tell us more about what the law says about the property you've acquired in your marriage. So Dennis is here. Lawyer, Akwaba.
Yeah, yeah.
It's to say. Nice, nice. Really good to see you. Looking
to see
sharp
you too.
today.
Good to see
Yeah,
you too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm excited about this conversation because a lot of people need the education, and that's why we decided to, commit our Thursdays to getting education on legal matters,
Yeah.
things that affect everybody. And today we're looking at married people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the law has a lot to say about property that you acquire during marriage.
Yep.
Okay. Just give us a general overview of what the law says, and then we can get into the details as we go along. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, ladies. I think we in terms of the law we have several kinds of it, but now in terms of marital property, and by practice, when our attention is drawn to marital properties, everybody's attention goes to landed properties.
Landed properties, yeah.
And for that matter, and based on case law, everybody's attention is on landed properties, and it's understandable because land as an asset, increases, and family is determined in terms of our household and all those things. So land and issues of houses come into, so people's attention are on those ones. Now, it's also important to note that in terms of a lifestyle of the ordinary Ghanaian, from age 0 to 23, you'll be in school, most likely. You'll be, SS 14 to 18, university, and after that, you are looking for a job, and then so from 25, 22, 23 to 27, you then get married sometimes in your late 20s or early 30s. That's how most professionals' lifestyle has been. So people's time that people make assets when they are married at that point in time. Majority of people, or they grow in wealth at time. So all of us can look at before we married our assets and after we marry. So most people, I'm not saying all people, most people acquire more assets when they are in marriage before, because ordinarily, if the average biblical age that we will live to is up to 70, and you are married in less than 30, so you have about 40 years of your life to live, and generational, in terms of wealth, sometimes generational. So you also grow to a certain stage where so most assets are acquired at a later age, and at that time, most people are married. Now, the bigger issue that comes is what happens, what is the legal ownership in terms of, marital properties acquired in the course of the marriage. Now, before we part, the current position of the law is that properties acquired during the marriage by the landlord is presumed to be owned by both of you. So if you don't even put the other partner's name on it, by position of law, it's presumed that the person is part of them, unless you state it in clear terms that the person is not part of the ownership. And I give a practical example. In terms of presumption, it's presumed that when a child is born in the course of marriage, is the father of the child is the husband, because motherhood is a fact, fatherhood is a belief. So the law presumes that, and also to allow it. So it's also presumed that when we cannot see somebody for a period of beyond 6 years, presume that the person is dead. So the law allows it, but the position of the law now is that in terms of marital properties, it's presumed that it's owned by both of you, and you can use evidence to establish it. Now, the landlord has even made it even more stronger by saying that if you are seeking to dispose of an asset, you need the consent of your other partner. And some of us have argued that the law is is more monogamous than polygamous in nature. Because remember that in Ghana, marriage is not just a husband and one wife. It can be a husband and 4 wives. It can be a husband as many wives, because the types of marriage that are recognized by law are 3. Monogamous marriage, which is more like the Christian marriage. Apart from that, 2, the Mohammedan marriage, which is the Islamic marriage, where person can marry about 4, and the customary marriage, which is as far as your hosts and cutlasses can take you. But most people, in terms of professionals, often go for the monogamous marriage. So the majority of people assisted in drafting the law, in my respectful opinion, otherwise the dynamics of it is very difficult, where you say to a man who has 4 wives that he should seek the consent of all his spouses to basically sell off or do anything for a relation to a property acquired in the course of marriage. It's all because we presume that properties in the course of the marriage is being to be owned by both spouses. And the funny bit of it is that it's easy for people, sociologically, for people to understand when we say that the woman owns part of the asset, but it's very difficult for most women to accept that the property that you have, your husband is presumed to own half of it.
Because now, I think in recent times, when you mention the spouse, everybody's thinking the woman.
Yes, but the spouse includes the husband.
It includes the husband as well. So if the woman has a property
Yes.
or acquires property in the marriage,
Yes.
the husband also owns it.
Yes. Unless the woman, and remember that the property issues always come up when there are issues of divorce. In the course of marriage, the law does not want to intervene into what, intervene in terms of the relationship between a husband and a wife, because those are private matters. But when people decide to split,
Yeah.
that's when issues come up that I also have an interest. I've spent 10 years or 20 years of my life with you. There are kids involved. All these properties and assets were made in such a way that I stayed home, you went to work, I've contributed towards it. And the court look at it from case to case basis. But as I said, most of the cases that, are reported are often the woman making claim to the assets of it. That's not to say that there are not situations where a man can also make claim to it. But because of our sociological context, I know that it's very difficult sociologically when you go and say that you want a part of your woman's asset. People will look at you some way. So most men might be willing to forgo those rights.
But the law wouldn't look at you anyway.
It depends on whether you accept it or
Yeah.
not. Most
Yeah.
people are not willing to. We have done divorces where people are not willing to accept that right. So what I always say that we look at it from case to case basis and look at the factors.
But generally, by this principle, it means that whether the
It's
spouse...
not a principle. It's actually the position of the statute now.
Okay.
Yes.
By this statute,
Yeah.
whether the spouse contributed money or not,
Yes.
they own the property too.
Of course, because remember that the case law has established now, and the funny bit of it is that it gradually, the case law seems to be shifting back and forth. But there have been situations where the court have considered in terms of the sexual intercourse, the provision of the convenience for you in the house, to have a peace of mind, to have and taking care of the children, among other factors, as contribution towards the asset.
That's your contribution to the asset.
Yes, there are case law on that. And certain people disagree with that position and think that, the law did not also contribute the man's chop money. But case law, the court always looks at it. And remember, at the end of the day, the court is seeking to administer justice. So what will be just? What will be equitable? What will be fair in that circumstances? So it's case by case basis. And I always say to people that the court is not there, quote unquote, for the truth. The court is there for the evidence. So if the person is not able to bring enough evidence to court to establish his contribution towards the whole thing, it will become a little bit problematic. There are instances where people know a lot of information, but they decide not to put everything before the court. So the court will make a judgment based on the evidence that they have seen before it. And certain people might disagree. Yes.
So whether people disagree with this law or otherwise, do you think it is a fair law? Do you think it is right? Or
For me, I think it looks at the dynamics are different from each of them. So I'll give you a practical example. A lady works so hard at a bank, takes a bank facility, a mortgage facility, pays off the mortgage facility, and there is a divorce, and the man says, I own 50% of that by reason of the presence in marriage. The reverse also the same, where the man also, it's case by case basis. And remember that it is not the law, the Constitution allows you to acquire your property individually or in association with others. So the bigger issue that the court always has to contend, whether or not the asset in question was jointly acquired. Are both of you your names on it? If your names are on the document, then it's understandable that you wanted to own it jointly. Even if the person's name is on it, has the person done certain things? So there are situations where somebody goes and take a mortgage, and the other partner is the one paying for the mortgage. Although in terms of paperwork, the payment might be in the other partner's name, the court will look at it and think that there's a resulting trust in favor of the other partner. That you could clearly see that although, the one who was deemed to have made the payment would have ended up, there have been situations where, females have provided funds for males to acquire properties, and only that is in the name of the man, and the man decides to disinherit them. So the court looks at it from case to case basis. But because remember where our laws are coming from. Our laws are coming from the Judaism side, the Christian side, and in it, the man and the wife will live and cleave and they will become one. So it's that same way that we are looking at it for become properties. There are instances where people are thinking that it's high time that the courts in Ghana enforce prenups. So people should be able to, look at it and say that we are going to marriage. You think, because of my love, that's what you want to have. You want to go. So let's believe in the love. Let's sign an agreement in case there is a divorce. I don't owe your property. You don't owe my property. Especially in situations where people had assets, major assets before the marriage, or there are even children involved. Okay, and I'll give you a practical example. There were situations where a 60-year-old woman who has made her life, built her property, got married in her late 60s.
In her late 60s?
In her late 60s. Now, after marriage, the woman then died. He married another man. The woman has built her own house. Family were living in. The man then comes in. Live with the woman dies. The woman did not leave a will. By operation of law, that property is a matrimonial property. And by law, it belongs to the spouse and the children. Now, the extended family of the woman do not understand it because when you came, the house was there, but the operation of the law, that's how the law. So the law sometimes is an quote-unquote an ass. It doesn't take care of all situations. That's one reason why on a case-to-case basis, you look at it and look at what is just and what is fair. And remember that when it comes to joint acquired property, sometimes the court will not even look at the adultery of the other partner. And there have been situations in this country where a very famous, individual got divorced. There were clear situations of adultery in it, but the court still gave the woman some assets because those assets were acquired jointly in the course of the marriage. So situations, there are people who believe that if the other part, especially when the man commits adultery, in terms of how we, the facts on the ground, when the woman commits adultery, there are instances where I've seen situations where people want to throw their wives out of the house as if the woman has never contributed towards the asset. The court will grant them something in case they're able to establish that they contribute towards the joint acquisition of the property.
Interesting stuff there. Wow. Okay, so the prenups, are they becoming popular now? Would you advise a prenup?
I think it's case to case basis. I think it depends on the individual in question. And people don't want us to talk about it as if when you are talking about a will, the person is going to die. Because people believe that prenup kills the romanticization of the relationship because because the thing is for life. You go and on the altar to say for better for worse, till death do you apart, and you are signing a contract to say that in case we depart. So people are not, in terms of public policy, but gradually, even in England, where our common law came from, all these places, South Africa, there's a growing, attention to it. And I think that, I know some people have signed prenups in Ghana. However, we are yet to see how the court will interpret it when it comes before. But the court will look at the justice of it. And does not enforce any, even in England and other places, the court just don't enforce the prenup. They consider several issues. And they also, apart from prenup, they also postnup. So before the marriage is prenuptial. And after the marriage, in case you decide to sign it, they call it postnuptial. So people can sign it. However, in terms of Ghanaian law, public policy is not in favor. But the way things are going now, I think public policy on a really horse is changing with time. People's understanding is becoming different. And if, the sanctity of marriage can be kept by signing prenup, why not? But it's up to the individuals to make a decision.
So with the updates on this Lands Act and all these acts that they're putting together to, more like shape marriage and property in marriage and all of those things, what's the ideal thing to do if you're a married man or a married woman? I know people are listening and now they are, counting their properties and then seeing whether, old boy owns some or wifey they own some or whatever it is. But what is it? Do people just, live or they need to do something?
I think marriage is a subjective test. It's not an objective test. It can work for you, it cannot work for you. So look at what works for you and make it work. But we don't also want a situation where because of the law, people become legal engineers. So all of a sudden, acquires the properties in the name of the mother, and here's the name of it's unhealthy. But at the end of the day, as I said, it's about what works for people. I know some people go about their normal activities. They don't have joint accounts with their spouses. They are okay. Everybody's having a separate issues among other factors. So, and I know some people who pay their wives to be in stay house moms and all those things. So it's about what works for people. But bear in mind that in the course of it, it's about what is fair at the end of the day. And all these questions come up, not the lovey times when people are going through the divorce and people are going through, after the death and all these issues come up. But in terms of the love moments, I don't think people count their properties.
Some people could be, preparing for rainy days and, sunny days as well. So anyway, if you have any questions about this, you can send us a WhatsApp right now on 055 1111997. I'm sure some people have started their thought process already, but 055 1111997. Now earlier as well, you mentioned that and that's according to the Lands Act as well, during the pendency of a marriage, if the landed property has to be disposed of, it has to be with the written consent of the spouse.
Yes. So because it's because let me tell you, this is based on experience. We have situations where, unknown to the other partner has used the property to go and take a facility at a bank, and you are there, and the person, the bank decides to enforce and come for the property. The other partner has no idea about it. There have been case law where, and in terms of our culture, at first, remember that men were the ones who named most assets. Men were the ones who put their names on the property individually. So if we do not put such restrictions, other partners become shortchanged. There have been situations where it's a wife who actually bought a property out, but the man, because the property was in the name, the man used the property for facility, and the bank came for it. The woman had to go to court to challenge, because at that time that issues have come up, there are children involved. This might be their only house that they are having. But if you do not take care, if we do not have some of these restrictions, it becomes a problem. But the other flip side is that where the man is, needs the asset to go and do a business transaction. And I believe that at the end of the day, can be a discussion that you can have with your partner. On that, there's clear situations where you can see some challenges, but this is what the position of the law does. That and it relates to properties acquired jointly in the marriage. So and that's more reason why you can have an understanding to let your other partner know that this particular property belongs to you solely.
Okay.
It is not a straightforward matter. It will be considered on case-to-case basis.
Yeah. Let me activate the phone lines 0302216541. We're running out of time, but I'll see whether we can be able to take a call or two if you have any question regarding this conversation that we're having here. 0302216541. So, what happens? For example, we just talked about getting the consent of the spouse to dispose of a property that you acquired during marriage. Now, what happens if you don't?
The nature of...
But before you answer mine, I think let's get on the phone line first, okay, please. Hello?
Yeah, hello, Lexis.
Yeah, bro.
That's a wonderful program. I've been waiting for this particular day. Now, Mr. Lawyer, let me get to know this. If you own the property, for instance, land, and start developing it for some maybe 2-3 years before you came in contact with the woman.
Before you did what?
You were with her.
Before you came in contact with the woman.
Yes.
Okay.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
You start developing the property, and before you got in, you knew her. You were cohabitating. You have one child. Then a year later, you completed the house and you move in. Please, if you are divorcing, if you go for divorce, do the woman have a share in the property?
So listen, I think there's explanation is to the effect that this lady that she was cohabiting with was there from the beginning when she acquired it and has even had a child, and then decides to acquire the property before the marriage and now have the marriage. in terms of case law, I don't know all the facts behind it, but I'm just giving what the case law have said. That in terms of even case law, we have something we call resulting trust. In terms of if the woman can demonstrate that in the court before the marriage, she actually contributed towards the acquisition of the property. I don't think that the court will look at these facts and say that because the date on the indenture was that before the marriage, and the woman who has been with you in the course of that relationship at the time, the person should be ignored. Bottom line is that it depends on the evidence that will be presented before the judge. So it's case by case basis. So it's very difficult for you to say that A, B, or C. But if the party has been able to clearly establish, can be able to establish that, you know what, if you look at, I solely acquired it, I did everything in relation to it, the court will not see it as a joint property. Because bear in mind, it should have been acquired in the marriage jointly. And if it was acquired before, ordinarily people will say it was before the marriage, but it all depends on the facts of it.
Okay. Let's see who's here. Hello?
Hello, Lexis.
Yes, you're welcome. What's your name?
Selassie from Ghana.
All right, Selassie, go ahead.
Okay, Lexis, my question is, a friend of mine got married and then I'm finding the man just passed on. So the question here is, they didn't have any kids, children together as well, and the man died. So my question is the woman having a share of the man's property?
How long were they?
So my understanding what he's saying is that they got married, never had kids, the man died.
Exactly.
And they had a matrimonial property that they were living in.
Yes, please.
By P&D's law 111, it belongs to the wife. So there's no dispute
really?
about that. Yes. That one is matrimonial. It will be determined by the P&D's law 111. Intersuccession law. That is understandable that the man did not have a will. The position of the law is quite clear on that it belongs to the wife. And I was given the example of other people seeing it as being unfair. Yeah. And I gave the 60-year-old individual, But the position of the law is that it goes to the wife and the children. And if there are no children, the spouse live in it.
Okay. A lot of calls are coming in.
That issue, there's a lot of brushes with custom relating to it. Because bear in mind that there are certain people who have become who they are by reason of their extended family. Certain women, their sisters had to be were not allowed to achieve their ambition so that they can raise funds to let them go. So if they go and they bring another woman into their lives, some families feel a real sense of entitlement. So it's always a tricky one. And we always advise that sometimes you can have a discussion on same and see how best you can resolve it.
Okay. Well, there's a lot more that we can explore, and I'm sure next week we can have a further conversation on this. I'm so grateful that you were able to come by. If you're just joining in, I've been having a conversation with my brother lawyer, Dennis Adjei Dwomoh, who's a managing partner at Law Plus Ghana, on property acquired during marriage, and some interesting stuff for everybody to think about. Yeah, so there you go. Thank you so much, Dennis, and regards to the team at Law Plus Ghana as well. So stay tuned in to Joy 99.7 FM. Hopefully next week we can have a part 2.
Open up the champagne.
Yeah.
It's my house. Come on, turn it up. Hear a knock on the door.